If you are a Ukrainian learner, most likely you've been learning the standard Ukrainian language. Standard language is the language you can see in textbooks. The standard Ukrainian is used on television, in state institutions. You can hear it on the radio as well. But do you really think that people speak the standard Ukrainian at parties or family gatherings or when they just stay at home with their parents and kids? Of course no. But before you get disappointed, just think about your own language. I'm pretty sure it works the same way. You have the standard language, which is supposed to help people from all the regions of your country find common ground, and which is considered correct or sometimes even perfect. But there are also dialects, slang, different language varieties. And it's natural. Language is alive. It's not a living being in the biological sense, but it's a dynamic and evolving system. New words appear every day. Old words stop being used. Some words are borrowed from other languages. So it's never that simple, which by the way explains why a language cannot be mastered in a month or even 3 months, as it is often advertised. Obviously, Ukrainian has its language varieties as well. It has regional dialects, especially when we are talking about the territories bordering other countries. Obviously, people communicate, some words get borrowed from other languages. It doesn't happen by force, it happens naturally, and it takes decades or even centuries. But then, there is another phenomenon in the Ukrainian language. It's called Surzhyk. If you have heard this word before, you probably think it's just Ukrainian and Russian mixed together. If you Google it, you may even find out that majority of Ukrainians can speak both Ukrainian and Russian, so obviously sometimes these languages are mixed, but it's absolutely wrong. Surzhyk is not just a mix of Ukrainian and Russian. And unlike dialects or other language varieties, which are natural, this phenomenon is not natural. Surzhyk is the result of one country invading other country and doing everything possible to make its language disappear. For many reasons, but first of all because it's difficult to control a huge empire consisting of a lot of nations, cultures, languages. So in order to make it all work, you need to make people believe they are brother nations, like a big family. And to make it more realistic, they need to speak the same language, and therefore the local languages of the mentioned empire must get extinct. Not naturally, of course, but with help. So, in other words, dialects appear naturally, but the phenomenon of Surzhyk was forced. How was it forced? Throughout Ukrainian history, the Ukrainian language has been banned so many times, and Ukrainian-speaking people were threatened and punished for using this language in so many ways, starting from getting deported from the country, getting killed, getting starved to death. The list goes on. So, long story short, at some point Russian started to dominate. It was prestigious, it was used by the authorities, and Ukrainian-speaking people tried speaking Russian without knowing Russian well enough, and they made mistakes. So they just combined Russian and Ukrainian words, or pronounced Russian words with Ukrainian accent, or applied Ukrainian grammar to Russian words and sentences. So Surzhyk is the language people spoke while transitioning from one language to another. Obviously, the transitioning happened faster in big cities. People who lived in villages continued speaking their own varieties of the Ukrainian language. But eventually, young people started to move from villages to big cities to study or searching for a job, and eventually they started to speak Surzhyk as well. Even in modern Ukraine, there is still this stereotype that people who speak Surzhyk are either ignorant or just come from a village, which is considered a bad thing. Just a few years ago, people were discriminated for their суржик. I'm from a small town, and I know perfectly well that when my classmates graduated from school and moved to bigger cities, they pretended to be Russian speakers just to avoid being laughed at and embarrassed. And some of them failed because it's actually not that easy to start speaking Russian when you've been speaking суржик since childhood. Sooner or later, you will make a funny mistake and will be laughed at, but not because of the mistake, mostly because of trying to be someone else, cooler than you really are. So, суржик appeared when people were forced to speak a different language, but not knowing how to do it correctly, they started to speak the way they could, mixing words, creating new words, mistranslating and mispronouncing. Surzhyk is not a dialect. There are no Surzhyk dictionaries, Surzhyk grammar. It doesn't have rules. It is uncontrollable and unpredictable. New words appear and disappear. And the most important thing is that in many regions of Ukraine, people still speak this way, even though Ukraine became independent 33 years ago. This is how huge is the influence of historical events on the language. Now, суржик is still discriminated, not because of being so far from the standard Ukrainian, but because of containing Russian words, or words that sound similar to Russian. So in two words, nobody likes it, but everybody speaks it. It doesn't mean you, as a Ukrainian learner, must try to learn суржик. I wouldn't recommend doing so. First of all, because it is impossible to learn a language that doesn't exist, doesn't have rules and standards, and changes its vocabulary every second. Now, the situation in the country changed. Ukrainian is starting to dominate, and people who were Russian speakers are trying to speak Ukrainian, but they make funny mistakes too, and суржик appears again. So, суржик is a very difficult thing to get rid of. I personally don't think people should be laughed at or judged for speaking суржик. Moreover, nobody should be judged for making language mistakes, not speaking perfect standard language, having an accent, or not being a native speaker. Let's not become slaves of grammar books. Remember, language is alive. We make it alive. We make it change. We create new rules and words. It all starts from us. Grammar books are just the reflection of the way the majority of the language speakers use this language. But languages change, and grammar books change too. And don't forget that the main purpose of a language is, first of all, communication. Language should not decide a person's value and tell if a person is smart or ignorant, good or bad, cool or not cool. We learn the standard language to be able to communicate with people from different regions and to be understood by people from different regions. Standard language should not be used as a means of discrimination. Now, the most interesting part. For you to understand how суржик works, let's have a look at these examples.
Привіт, привіт, привіт. Як справи? Как дела? Як діла? Мені подобається виноград. Мені нравиться виноград. Мені нравиться виноград. Не раджу вам чекати. Не советую вам ждать. Не советую вам ждати. До зустрічі. До встречі. До встречі.